right. Well, welcome today to another What's the Point? It is a talk about economic development in Wyoming and how do we utilize our capabilities in Wyoming and grow those so that we can ensure that Wyoming is viable and sustainable far into the future, with the local communities really doing as much as they can to define their unique economy and build that economic development base that we know they can. Today, I'm sitting down with Professor Ricardo Hausmann from the Harvard Growth Lab, and you're the founder of Harvard's Growth Lab. And the team here at Harvard and Wyoming has been working hard on a project called Pathways to Prosperity, which is really a methodology intended to, again, build those capabilities at the local level and look at our economy in a slightly different way and help us achieve that strategy that we've been after. And so today, Ricardo, I'm just excited to be here and talk with you and looking forward to you sharing some insights and some of your experiences that you've had over time with economic development. So thank you for being here.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity, and thanks for coming here to Harvard and to give this magnificent lecture you gave us today. Brought a standing room only crowd, and that you very much impressed on them the interesting opportunities and challenges that Wyoming faces, and the attitude with which you're facing those opportunities, which was very refreshing.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was my pleasure to be here, and you did. You brought a great crowd, and
you brought the crowd.
Well, the questions that we had by our moderator afterwards, Gordon Hansen, as well as the questions from the audience, it tells me that one, that there's an astute audience here, clearly, but also that there are problems that maybe are similar in other areas. And so maybe to just get started, I thought we'd talk a little bit about your work around the world, and in some of those cases where things have gone really, really well, and then maybe some of those cases where the challenges haven't been overcome, and maybe what you've seen in those situations.
Absolutely, with pleasure. Well, as you know, we think very much in terms of capabilities. Humans are, we survive not by grabbing things from the world, but by transforming the world to our liking. So we don't go around hunting for, looking for a hamburger tree, right? If we want a hamburger, there's a lot of stuff that needs to happen to make a hamburger. So in that process of transforming the world to our liking, if we want to go from a beautiful meadow, say, to an omelet, there's a lot of transformations that need to happen. We use knowledge. We use knowledge about the nature of the world, about how to do things in the world. And because our minds are somewhat limited, we cannot stuff all that knowledge into a single head. So, for example, if you look at a cookbook, it'll tell you, take these ingredients, put them in these pots and cans, and put them in energy and so on, heat it up, and then you move around with this spoon or whatever, and then once it takes this shape, then it's done, right?
Right.
So that's the cookbook. It doesn't tell you how to make the ingredients. It doesn't tell you how to make the pots and pans. It doesn't tell you how to make the energy.
Right.
So you are there relying on other people having done things before you come online, right? So in some sense, if you think of it in a certain way, all of these things that we're using were made with knowledge that other people had in your value chain, if you want.
Right.
So as knowledge grows, you have to split that value chain more, because each component has more knowledge, and I'm a bad cook, but I would be a hopeless producer of the ingredients and a hopeless producer of the pots and so on. So the way the world grows its capabilities, it's by putting different bits of knowledge in different heads.
Okay.
So
distributed knowledge.
Okay. And then connecting that knowledge in firms where, to run a firm these days, you need people who know about accounting, about finance, about marketing, about human resource management, about procurement, about production, about contracts, about taxes.
Right.
You need people who know about these many things coming together in a coordinated way.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
And because that's so hard to do it, maybe you split it up, and so you hire an accounting firm, or you don't make your own electricity, you buy the
Right.
electricity from somebody else, or your inputs from somebody else. So you're essentially creating this network
Right.
of connected brains, connected minds, connected people who are the ones that are doing these things. So as an economy uses knowledge more intensely, it develops a more diversified labor force that knows about different things. I like to say that societies know more when individuals know different.
Yeah.
That it's not a society that knows a lot doesn't know a lot because they're all geniuses. It's because somebody's a dentist and not somebody else is a lawyer and somebody else is an accountant and so on. So the whole knows about dentistry, law, and accounting, but not because everyone knows. So this distributed knowledge networked
Right.
through value chains and through firms, that is the engine of human progress. And so that's how we think of facilitating that progress by thinking of ways in which this process can happen in an easier way.
So, and I love that, and I definitely love the idea of the networking component of that, and how important that is, the interactions between those groups or those people to do that. And I love the idea of like that whole idea that diverse capabilities coming together, networked, is huge. So with technology, in some ways it should make that easier to happen, even in remote or distributed places like Wyoming, where we're quite remote. We have a very sparse population. Is technology the way to bridge that gap and create that distributed network of people around the state to create a cluster in a way that maybe hasn't been created before?
I mean, it's a very interesting question for which we don't really yet have the answer. That is, what we know through history is that humans have wanted to mingle. That if you look at all of these major cities where people spend 1-2 hours going to work and then 1-2 hours coming out of work, it tells you how much they are willing to sacrifice to get together.
Yeah.
To get together. It's sort of like there must be a force attracting them that compensates for the pain of putting yourself in that predicament, right? Of traffic and congestion and so on. So that has been the history, that humans, once they no longer needed to spend the bulk of work producing food that had to be on land and so on, when they could produce other things, they wanted to mingle. Now, with COVID, we found out that things we used to do in the office, we can do from home. But then we realized that if we can do it from home, we can do it from anywhere.
Right.
So suddenly, the reasons to agglomerate in a certain point in space, may no longer be that strong. So we've actually been researching that and asking ourselves, what are the jobs that are more teleworkable?
Right.
What are the industries that are more intensive in teleworkable jobs? Which of those industries might be able to delocalize so that you don't have to be near your customers?
Right.
Like, for example, if you're going to be a barber, it's useful to have your scissors close to the hair that you plan to cut.
That's correct, yes.
But if you are the accountant, you may not have to be next door. If you are the website designer, you don't have to be next door, and so maybe some of these industries will delocalize, and maybe some of these occupations will delocalize. And so we studied that and explored for a particular country, in this case Colombia, which could those industries be, in which they already have the skills, and which ones have global markets that they may tap into, and so on. So yes, I think that this is an evolving field, and I think Wyoming has the potential of benefiting for the reasons you mentioned, that it has low density and beautiful space. So So people like to live in Wyoming. They like to enjoy the outdoors, and maybe they don't need to be close to other humans that are going to cause traffic in the way of going to work. So
That's right.
yeah. So maybe that's still a little bit in our future,
Right.
In an uncertain future. But
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, and that is a question that we get a lot about remote work, and should we attract remote workers to a state like Wyoming? And one of the questions that I have, and that will probably come out of some of this research, is not only what types of things work best for that, what types of jobs or occupations work best for that, but also what is the impact on the community over time from that? Is it a net positive, or is it a drain? And I think that there's a big question in Wyoming about that, because we have so much public service, available to a citizen, and they don't pay a whole lot to get it. And so there's this question of, well, if a bunch of remote workers come, what will happen to my services? Will they go down? Will we be broke faster? What's the problem? And so I'm interested in that a lot.
No, that's a very interesting question. It's a little bit one of the embarrassment of riches, that because you have all this mineral wealth, you don't have to tax your residents, and if you don't tax your residents, when residents move in, they don't contribute, and you say, well, I have to distribute my mineral wealth over more people, and that might create an attitude against growth. That's why it's sometimes useful to have a tax structure where everybody sort of pays their way. And now I do believe that the sort of like the lowest hanging fruit,
right,
is just to have digital nomads. So you work for Facebook, but you live in Jackson, or in Lander, or in Cody.
right.
But maybe it can be a little bit more complex, that you actually are not an individual that's hired by a company somewhere else, but you have a company with some set of people in Wyoming, but your customers can be very far away, and they used to have them in their own company, but now they have delocalized them.
Right.
They have transformed the task into a contract, and you run your business from Wyoming. And that would generate not just a bunch of individuals who work
Right.
remotely, but organizations that work from Wyoming to serve the world. And that I think is where a lot of the interesting things might actually emerge.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting perspective of saying, okay, so you might have an individual who does a task for a company that they work remotely. So they're in Casper, Wyoming, but they work for a company that's headquartered somewhere else. And the question that we are skirting around or thinking about is it the organization that helps build capabilities in the community, or is it the individual, or which one has a bigger bang for its buck, for example? And I think that's something that we as a state entity, we're trying to build that capacity at a local level. So bringing people in, or bringing organizations in that can function and provide diversity of how they do things, or provide opportunities for their employees to float between companies and move around and do other things. That mobility, I think, is one way of kind of cross-pollination, if you will, or providing that network effect. And whether it can be an individual node or an organizational node is a really interesting thing.
I think I'm an enthusiast of organization,
Yep.
and I see it in the Harvard Growth Lab, that the Harvard Growth Lab can do things that I cannot do. Right? Because at the Harvard Growth Lab, there are people who know things that I don't know, and we have people who know a lot about natural language processing and artificial intelligence and front-end design and back-end design, and I'm too old to catch up on all of these things. The programming languages have changed so much that I speak all of them with a terrible accent. So I do believe that organizations can achieve collectively what individuals can't.
Right.
So it's important that you build these organizations, and these organizations can then give opportunities in life to many members,
Right.
but by empowering them with the knowledge that other people in the team have,
Right.
that can collectively do things that no individual can do.
Right. Right. So you were able to spend some time in Wyoming, I believe about a month ago or so, and see various communities in Wyoming. What were some of the things that struck you?
Well, I mean, first of all, the stunning beauty of the state to begin with, and how cool places were. From Lander to Riverton to Casper to the Wind River Reservation. I had been earlier in Jackson, so it's a very impactful state. But what it really struck me is the energy of its people. So I visited, thanks actually to the Wyoming Business Council, who organized for me an incredible agenda of super interesting firms that are diversifying different places in these towns. I saw really interesting productive capabilities from lenses for guns in Lander to heat exchangers and sophisticated biotech in Casper. So very interesting set of opportunities, and with a huge market in the U.S. and even in the world. I mean, people were exporting across the world. All of these,
like hunting scopes and
the scopes.
Yeah.
Maven, they're called. Yes.
Right.
No. Competitive to export all around the world, and with customers all around the world, and with suppliers all around the world.
Right.
So from Wyoming, you are connected both on the supply side and on the demand side to the world. Very interesting. I was extremely impressed by the impact that some organizations that the state has, like UW, like the community colleges, and like the Wyoming Business Council, have in empowering these communities to be able to do things that wouldn't otherwise happen on their own. And so I really enjoyed my time very much. I had been for conferences earlier, but this time, thanks to the Wyoming Business Council, I could get inside businesses, inside even urban developers and city governments, and so on. So it was a very professional opportunity to watch the state, and I was actually super impressed by the people working at the business council, because they knew everybody and their brother. So they knew everybody. They were completely embedded in the communities, and they really thought they were aware of all the opportunities that were arising, and were able to connect people and to create networking facilities,
Right.
like the one I visited in Riverton, that facilitate this entrepreneurship to emerge.
Yeah, that idea of we're a pretty small state population wise, so we know each other pretty well, and we know somebody who knows somebody really readily is an important component. And I think that's what, to me, is there's a great opportunity, especially when we talk about that networking and how do we take all of those capabilities and network them together. And obviously, human to human contact is important for that. But if you can, kind of keep that network going again with technology in the best way possible, maybe we can kind of utilize that network effect of us knowing everybody and their brother, and that's key. How about if we take a step back a little bit, because over the last few years, for sure, there's been an awful lot of money by the federal government to help with, to kind of bring the United States, into different areas that maybe we weren't, or maybe looking at strategic areas like, for example, the electronics, a lot of the CHIPS Act, for example, or the IRA. These are big programs to try to enable industrial policy in America. And really, what I'm trying to figure out is how are people taking the most advantage of them? Are there challenges that brings up? And what does that mean for kind of the global scale of markets and trying to understand all of that?
Yeah, I mean, the world is in a transition. We know that you know greenhouse gas emissions are an issue, and the world is trying to decarbonize, and they're trying to create pressures for everybody to decarbonize. But the truth is that if the world is going to decarbonize, it's going to need a lot of stuff, and those things are going to be in very high demand.
Right.
So if you're able to provide them, that's a form of livelihood. The things that the world that will need,
Mm-hmm.
are things that you can make.
Right.
And if you can identify them, that can become a source of growth. So I saw very interesting ideas as I visited Wyoming. I saw this idea of making blue hydrogen by maybe using coal to generate the electricity to generate hydrogen, capturing the CO2
Mm-hmm.
and storing it underground. And you have the advantage that you have that you know your geology,
Right.
so you know where you can store it, the CO2. It's something that most places in the world don't know or don't have.
That's right.
So that's a clear opportunity. You're getting into nuclear energy,
Right.
and with these small nuclear reactors, and that may allow you to generate other interesting things. And if you have that clean, cheap energy, you might be able to get into other things. And
That's right.
I heard about these ideas of vertical agriculture
Mm-hmm.
that you're pushing very strongly in Laramie and at UW, and that might transform the way the world feeds itself, and
Right.
that might generate enormous opportunities for Wyomingites, probably in the production of the tools and equipment and the things that technology will demand. So I saw a lot of super interesting ideas that are emerging, in part because the world is trying to decarbonize itself, and you have the capacity to supply many of the things that the world is going to need, including these critical minerals,
Right.
that you also are endowed with, and that might generate livelihood for a bunch of other people. And in addition, well, you have your beauty, and tourism is is an important engine of growth for you, and it probably can be made to spill over to more locations in the state.
Right. Yeah, and that whole idea of transforming or growing our economic base into something new. Can you talk a little bit about other places in the world where you've worked where they've been predominantly focused on one particular, one industry or one commodity in their economy, and they've had to sort of branch out from that and not necessarily throw that one away, but really kind of create an and economy, where they have what they do really well, but also include new things as well, so that it really grows the whole pie.
I am particularly impressed by the way United Arab Emirates have done it. I come from Venezuela. Venezuela is also a country that has very, very large oil reserves. By some account, Venezuela has the highest oil reserves in the world, and the largest, and we made a mess of things. So I know that it's easy to lose a very good hand if you don't play well. But the Emirates are, in some sense, at the opposite end. Other people, when they say, "Oh, we need to diversify. We have oil, so let's do petrochemicals."
Sure.
And with
Yeah,
petrochemicals, so let's add value to our oil.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the direction that much of the Emirates took. What they said is sort of like, because we have oil, we have high income. Because we have high income, we can afford good infrastructure, and good amenities. Well, guess what? Good infrastructure, good amenities Maybe we can get into the airline business. And so they have Emirates Airlines, that is one of the biggest airlines in the world. Maybe we can get into shipping. So they have, they are a logistics hub, and everything goes through Dubai, and they've bought a bunch of ports around the world. Well, since they have that in all these amenities, they became a good tourist destination and a lot of fancy places to go. But then that became attractive to attract, say, the regional headquarters of multinational corporations. Right. So all the multinational corporations are there, and they think of themselves and that they want to become a brain port.
Right.
And so they want to attract the talent of the world. So they change their immigration policies to become more attractive as a destination for talent. So they ended up getting into fast-moving business services, insurance, finance, engineering, business services in general, like advertising, legal, etc., project design for not for their own needs, but for the regional needs, for global needs. And that means that they got there thanks to oil.
Sure.
But not by transforming the oil itself, but by using the oil to accumulate a set of capabilities that opened up other opportunities, that made them accumulate more capabilities, that created even more opportunities. Right. So you have the tourism, the business center, the financial center, the logistics, the air travel, all of that being built thanks to an initial spark from oil.
I like that. I like that example a lot because clearly it's something that can resonate with us in Wyoming, and it's a way to think about that. And I guess what I'm hearing is you utilized oil, but you utilized the capabilities the oil brought, and then you transferred it into other areas. And I think about how do we develop that framework to leverage those capabilities. And the work that we're doing with the Growth Lab is obviously there's a framework that's developed on how to solve problems, how to look at them deeper than they are, really get down to some of the root problems and try to shape policy and funding around those. But then I also look at how do we take those tools and get them in the hands of people who maybe haven't had those tools before. Is there a way that we could sort of accelerate that knowledge transfer into our local communities so they have that, they kind of have that framework for solving problems? They might have capabilities in coal mining or in gas production or in trona mining, but then how do we get them the tools to easily pivot into from a subject matter to a capability, right?
No, that's very interesting. By the way, I really want to commend your plans to create that capacity to build capabilities in communities, and we're very eager to see how our project co-creates some things that that will allow you to serve better the communities. When I visited Casper, I remember watching this company that makes heat exchangers and big equipment, capital goods, high-end capital goods with that are very demanding in terms of design and tolerance, and because they're subject to high pressure, high temperature, right. That have to be well done, because they were demanded by the oil industry.
Right.
Well, but guess what? It's not the only industry that demands those capabilities.
Right.
So there are many other industries for which those capabilities are very valuable, and thanks to oil, you build those capabilities, but now that you have those capabilities, you can move elsewhere. Right. Let me give you an example that I like to give. If you think of Finland, Finland is this country, full of trees. So you say, well, we have so many trees, we should produce wood. But then you say, well, but why wood? Maybe we should add value to our wood. Maybe we should make furniture, or maybe we should make, paper, right? And those things actually happened in Finland. But the interesting thing that happened in Finland is that they were cutting wood, and in the process, they needed cutting tools and cutting machinery. So So they became good at machines that cut wood. And then they became good at automated machines that cut wood, because cutting everything by hand and so on can get it either boring or imprecise. So automated machines that cut wood. And from there they moved to automated machines that cut other things, because not everything in the world is made out of wood. So maybe cut leather, cut textiles, cut metals. So they became good at, so from automated machines that cut many things, they moved into automated machines, because there's more to world than life than just cutting, right? So and from there they ended up in Nokia, which became the largest cell phone company in the world. But interestingly, it was a company that could not make the transition from cell phones to smartphones. Okay, but the story is that yes, there is, what can you do with the materials, with the wood, right? But what this alternative path shows is what happens when you add capabilities to your capabilities.
Right.
Not to your raw materials, to your capabilities. So from cutting wood to cutting other things to automation, to forget cutting, automation, and other things.
You open yourself up to infinite, well, maybe not infinite, but at least a geometric progression of possibilities.
Many other possibilities that are in the adjacencies of your capabilities, not necessarily in the adjacency of your materials.
And really one of the big goals that we have is how do we have resilience or confidence in our economy regardless of market forces or the things that are going on in one particular industry, because we're quite affected by energy industry. And so how do we build that resilience? Well, if you have capabilities on your capabilities, then you can utilize those capabilities in what is hot at the time, or what is not going to maybe go away for a bit, and build that capability out. So that opens you up to resilience, right?
Absolutely. I mean, one way to resilience is that you have so many capabilities that you can reorganize them in many directions.
Right.
In Venezuela, we had just the oil industry, and we would go up and down with the oil industry, and in the process of going up and down, actually destroying everything else around it. So yes, diversification is a way to make yourself more resilient by having more options and more opportunities, and actually de facto more knowledge, because you have more distributed capabilities, more distributed knowledge, and more ability to do things.
Yeah, I really like that idea of capability building. I think it takes a lot of confidence in that system to say we're not going to just run after an industry, because people like to point to an industry, but instead we're going to build our capabilities so that we're much more useful, and again much more resilient or strong, regardless of what's going on outside of us, right? The other forces. I like that.
Yeah, and I mean, the problem with moving to new things is that these new things face a chicken and egg problem. Mm-hmm. They face a chicken and egg problem because if you want to do new things, you have to do things that you haven't done before, but you typically don't know how to do the things you don't do. How are you going to do things if you don't know how to do them? Mm-hmm. So how can you make watches if you don't have watchmakers? But how do you become a watchmaker in a place that doesn't make watches?
Right.
So how do you solve these chicken and egg problems? And the truth is, well, one way to do it is to move to things that are not too many chicken and egg problems away.
Right.
So that's why to be aware of the things that are adjacent to what you already know how to do and are maybe just one chicken and egg problem away is one idea. And the other idea is that you are in the center, in the middle of, the biggest economy in the world. So there's a lot of these capabilities that are in other states of the union that you can just attract in and move in. And they don't need a passport to go from New Jersey to Wyoming. And so you can bring talent from elsewhere to complement the talent that you have homegrown. And that makes the process even easier.
Right. right? So that's broadening that network even a little bit more, right? And the connections there. That's great. Well, Ricardo, this has been really good for me. I appreciate the work that you've done and the perspective that you're bringing, because I think sometimes everybody gets focused on the things that are in your own backyard, and the things that are near and dear to you, and without understanding those things that are adjacent to us, or recognizing that we have capabilities that an adjacent industry would love to have. Sometimes you just forget. You work so hard on what you do every day that you forget that there's a bigger world out there, more opportunities. And sometimes it takes a little bit of an outside perspective or stepping back from the problem. And, that's what I believe the work that the Growth Lab is doing with us today is helping us do. But I also think it's also, we're beginning to give permission to people in Wyoming to say, like, take a moment, step back from what we do really, really well, because we do some things really, really well, and see where else we can apply those capabilities. And I think that to me has been probably the biggest step, is thinking less about the industries and more about the capabilities, because then we can control that portion. We can continue to grow that portion to address the industries that come, or the industries that make the most sense. And so to me, that has been a fundamental shift. It's really important. I think the more we can get that out there in the hands of our communities and the leadership around Wyoming, the better we're going to do. And I really believe that the work that you're doing with us and the work that you've done in the past is helping that a lot.
Well, and you're helping us a lot. You are helping us understand a part of the world we hadn't worked before, and how things can be done differently. So we're learning very much thanks to our engagement.
Thank you. Well, thank you for your time today. I'll probably ask you for another bit of time to do this again, because I think this has been fantastic, and it's really just to start. So thank you today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.